So, what happens when people with differing religious views sit down for a conversation?
I'm a Sunni Muslim.
Pretty vanilla Christian.
This year, Central Florida Public Media and StoryCorps are bringing together strangers to take one small step by having a guided conversation about politics and life with someone who has differing political views. This morning, we hear from Robert Jackson, executive pastor at Orlando Grace Church. He spoke with Fatima Saied, executive director of the Muslim Women's Organization. Saied starts the conversation.
My dad was gung-ho Republican, and he would go to the Republican National Convention even, because for him, the fiscal policies made sense, you know, and even the religious things, they were very a conservative background. But at the same time, I know with my friends, their parents would be, you know, voting for Bill Clinton, you know, at the same time that we're not. So it was really you saw both. You saw, depending on the conditions of each family, usually in the mosque when we were growing up, the conversations weren't around vote for this person or that person. Even when my dad was involved in the civic engagement work, it was really just get out and vote. You know that your voice matters. You need to vote. Could you briefly describe, in your own words, your personal political values?
So Christian ethics really boils down to loving God and loving people. So that's what I tell my two kids when I ask them, you know, what does God say to do? Love God, love other people. Christianity is, for 2,000 years, has done a decently good job of focusing on loving God, and there's a long tradition of that. And then the loving people tends to be where we've sort of struggled, to say the least. And so trying to figure out, how is it that you love people because you love God, in a way that's related to how you love God?
For me, I have always been no party affiliation, to my father's dismay, because he was very Republican. I would not list Republican on mine because I was like, I just don't believe with a lot of the things that platform stands for. I just don't. Same thing with Democrats. I just don't. Yeah. So for me, I was always just third party and Green Party. I always voted for that Green Party person, and I think now it's hard. And there's so much judgment, and there's so much, it's your fault that person won, or your fault that person. And I was like, no, it's not. None of that is my fault. Because I always voted for whoever I thought was the kindest person, the most just person, the one who would care for the earth, you know? So I think for me, my politics and my political values really align with my personal values.
You and I agree very much on everything you said. Yeah. Okay. I've always been independent or third party. I've leaned libertarian at times, but that group is a very, very, very mixed bag. Where I grew up, in the spaces that I grew up in, there was a lot of Southern Baptist areas, even if we weren't in the South, you know, like in Minnesota and Colorado and other places. And you'd hear Republicanism and Christianity just like merged as if they're the same. And or as if Republicanism is the best manifestation of Christian values. It's the most consistent way that you do politics if you read the Bible. And like you have become increasingly disillusioned with that idea and have consistently leaned third party. But I really appreciate how you said looking for whoever is just and kind. I struggle with voting many elections because there's oftentimes not someone who represents both what I think Jesus wants us to do and the way that I think Jesus wants us to do it. And therefore they can't represent me as a voter. So that's difficult. Yeah.
And I think there's this separation of church and state, right? Yeah. Supposedly.
Supposedly,
church and state.
Yeah.
And I think those lines get so blurred.
How would you see your religious views influencing your politics, like your religious ethics? How does that play out in your political convictions?
The way that it influences mine is, how do I have the right to practice my faith, right, without the state impeding my practice of my faith? I think that's where I have to really think about the lines that need to be drawn. We say it in the beginning of every single chapter of the Quran. We start it with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. God, the most gracious, the most merciful. And I think about if I can see somebody and feel mercy for them and feel like I understand what you're going through and I forgive you and I see that and it's okay. And it has to do with any issue, LGBT issues, a trans woman, anybody. When I see them and I can have some mercy for them, I truly believe God is infinitely more merciful. Mm-hmm. So how can I stand in judgment against somebody who may be doing something doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they have? And I'm not going to be sitting there and judging that person.
Yeah, I think I very strongly agree with the ethic that you're talking about, particularly the emphasis on mercy and on compassion. I think that's a great way to sum up even the most conservative Christian Old Testament view of God, which I'm a huge fan of the Old Testament, but what does the Lord require of you except to love mercy and to do justice and to walk humbly with your God? That should be Christian religion.
So what's something you will take away from this conversation?
Yeah. It was really helpful for me to hear you explain how the faith tradition for Muslims, in your experience, has been a place where you can sort of leave your differences at the door. You were talking about how Islamic faith can be compatible with either a liberal political ethic or a conservative one, or something that's really neither of those, and apolitical or a party system. That was really helpful.
It really opened my eyes that Christian evangelical, like a pastor, is not what I had in my head. Right? There are different ways of being, just the same as in our own faith tradition. One thing I'll take away is that I need to not start judging people in my own mind based on these labels that have been put on people in the media, and just really have more conversations like this.
Thanks. I appreciate that. We also put a lot of those labels on ourselves sometimes.
StoryCorps' One Small Step and the radio station hubs are made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. To sign up for a conversation, visit cfpublic.org/one small step.